Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay.
So, Adriano, tell me when we are live.
Yes, I will.
I've always wanted to be alive.
Why they put this now?
We are still alive.
We are live now.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes, I think we are live now.
So, Adriano, tell me when we are live.
Yes, I will.
Hello, everyone. I sent you a warm welcome today from Mississippi, from the University in Mississippi. We are at a social conference for social and conceptual issues and astrobiology. My special guest today is Seth Shostak.
It's not that special.
Not for me, for us it's special. And we are going to talk about women in astronomy. My name is Sabine Heinz, and I'm the person responsible for our webinar series. And as tomorrow is 7th of March, the International Women's Day. We chose this topic. And I also would like to remind you to write us in the chat where you are watching from. And if you have any questions for our guest speaker, please write it in the chat. I will forward it to Seth later on. As I told you, tomorrow is International Women's Day, so it makes sense that we dedicate today's webinar to this topic because women still do not have the same right as men. They still have to fight for things that men take for granted. Women do not get the same wages as men. When women go to work, they often have a triple burden or fourth burden: household, children, job, and the man. And women still have to fight for their rights to education. Of course, this is one, of course it is done to keep women small so they can be dominated by men. In some region, yeah, you have to laugh, Seth.
Well, but I just want equal time to defend men. But okay.
Yeah, you can defend. Yeah, I'm talking about the whole world, as not only a special region.
Not just this building.
And I have to say, even in West Germany, Mädchen, and the 1980s, they had a law that the woman had to ask their husband if they could go to work. And you have to imagine this, it was really written by law, and how difficult it was for many women to assert their desire for education. We will show today with some examples of women in astronomy, and I'm very pleased that I was able to win our special guest, who has already spoken twice at our webinar series. Seth, welcome.
Well, thank you
for being with us.
Great.
And I also would like to welcome Bernard Foing, our president. He is now talking from Atacama Desert in Chile. Now you are in La Serena, a nice place. Welcome, Adriano.
Hello. I'm here.
Oh, yes, I wanted to say hello from yes, South America. So it's I have been working there for 3 years in my youth as an astronomer and at the European Southern Observatory. And here we have had a series of expeditions together with the University de Atacama that is based in Copiapó city. And now I'm going to give a lecture actually a bit later to the geology department. And tomorrow we'll have also a general presentation in the Casa de Cultura, so in the culture for the public. And we had a team of young professionals here, some 9 young professionals coming from Europe, and also a team from the Copiapó itself. So very nice collaboration where there was quite an intense expedition going at the Salar in the desert at 3,500 meter altitude, a place very similar to Mars. And then later, a few brave explorers even ventured up to 5,500, and even 3 made it to 6,600 meter altitude. And so there was some research also on studying glaciers that are diminishing, so as a way to monitor climate change, but also the hydrology, the astrobiology of places that are very similar to Mars, microbiology, and there was also a medical follow-up of high altitude. So a good way to prepare this young professional, not only to the science, but also to the exploration and human aspect of going into the extreme. So all the best from all of us in Atacama. And I wanted to say that there was a very good gender balance in this crew. So I think we implemented. And I have to say that to the top, 2 ladies reached the top and 1 man. So they did very good. Yeah. And so that's very promising. And of course, we are very engaged in what we believe the most important resources we can find in space. This is to educate creative mind. And I think that we want to do that in a peaceful way, create minds to work together, to understand different cultures, to develop technologies for peaceful purpose, and not to make war. So we are very touched by the current situation, and we want to use space and science as a way to bridge people, to inspire youngsters, and to discover the best in what we have, and not fight all the conflict, because there are really much more important challenges for humanities, global change, and sustainable development goals that we have to address. So that's my message from Atacama, and thanks very much, Seth, Adriano, and Sabine, for having this upcoming debate on women in space. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I thank you, Bernard. And I also would like to greet Adriano Tino, our former president and founder of the SRI, and now one of our vice presidents. And I have to thank you that you every time hosting with me the webinars and doing all this technical part. I'm very grateful for this. Welcome, Adriano.
Thank you very much, Sabine. I'm very happy that we have again our friend Seth Shostak, that I think Space Renaissance is home now. I'm very happy of that, and is a wonderful speaker and a deep culture about space and extraterrestrial life and all these kind of things. And then, yes, this night we will talk about women in astronomy and in space, and this is a very important argument, very important topic, because I think women have many to say and to give to science and to humanity and to the civilization. And we hope that women will also help us to avoid horrible wars like the one that is dramatically affecting Ukraine in these days. So we hope that if we will have more women in leading positions, then maybe we will be a little bit more peaceful, and we will have some more chance to have a future as a civilization. So it's very important, the discussion of this webinar about the contribution of women in astronomy and in, let me say, also in astronautics and in the civilization expansion into space. I would like just to remember that we are the Space Renaissance International, a not-for-profit organization, and everybody is invited to subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Space Renaissance YouTube channel, and also to subscribe as members of our organization. You can find everything on our website, spacerenaissance.space, and then I will also post the link in the chat here. Okay, so welcome everybody to this webinar, and the floor is to you, Sabine.
Okay, thank you for your nice words, and I have to admit that the war what's happened in Europe these days is affecting all wise, affecting mostly women and children, because they are the most defenseless citizen or people in these times, and and we are thinking of all these people having to stand this war, and I will go now to our topic, and I would like to say thank you for joining us. And we have people watching from Copenhagen, hey Pia, and from Alaska, and from Atlanta, and from, what's this?
Republic of South Africa.
Ah, yeah, okay, South Africa, and yeah, welcome everyone. And if we leave through the great book of the history of astronomy, we actually only find men as bearers of great names, from Hipparchus and Ptolemy in antiquity, to Al-Sulfi in the Arabian Middle Ages, to the European Renaissance with Copernicus, Kepler, Galilei, or Tycho Brahe, Tycho Brahe in German, all men. And even the greats of the modern times are men, or they're all male, like Hubble, Eddington, and Einstein. In physics, Lise Meitner and Marie Curie may have been the only deviations from the statistical mean. And yeah, this leads me to our topic. And I would like to ask our guest, Seth, what do you think are the early examples in history about women in history?
Well, Sabine, I mean, I'm undoubtedly slighting some women who, you know, practiced astronomy in the time of the Egyptian pharaohs, or, you know, I mean, but the ones that are known to us are all women who were working at the end of the 19th century. So you think about it, there have been 3,000 centuries, is that right? It's almost right. Yeah, 3,000 centuries for Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens has been around for 3,000 centuries. For some of us, you know, we can feel it all. I mean, 3,000 centuries of it. But actually, women working in astronomy, that's only in the last 130 years or thereabouts. So the last century. So that's a fundamental change, because, you know, there weren't many opportunities for women in astronomy, even after astronomy first became a scientific discipline. So I think that's a good thing.
I think that women have been working earlier in astronomy, because if I remember to Nicole Rain-Lepaud, she lived in the 18th century, or Caroline Herschel. These are names from more than 100 years ago.
Well, I stand corrected, or I sit corrected. Yes, that's true. All right, so move it 2 centuries out of 3,000 centuries.
But can
not much better.
Yeah, but can you tell us something about this woman?
Yeah. Well, it was, of course, sort of a societal norm. You know, consider the 18th century. Don't consider the 18th century is hard to envision for a lot of people, but the 19th century is, you know, not so far back in time. And if you were a guy and you wanted to go into astronomy, right? Well, you could do that. I mean, it wasn't institutionally forbidden for you. But, you know, you couldn't really, as a woman, you could not get a job other than a very menial job, right? They would allow you to maybe do a little bit of maintenance on the telescopes or copy records, or, you know, that sort of thing, menial work. And of course, there were very many talented women who were interested in astronomy at this time. And they broke the barrier. They got through this glass ceiling, if you will, and, you know, did fundamental work. In fact, you could say that the most fundamental work in astronomy, you know, 110, 120 years ago was done by women. And I think that there are a lot of astronomers themselves that don't really remember that, or they don't necessarily remember it, but they're not necessarily aware of that.
Does women have some special habit or special ability which men doesn't have, what they make more perfect for science or for astronomy? What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's a very dangerous territory to say that, you know, there's some talents that women have more of than the men, or the other way around, that only men can do this and the women have to do that or anything. It's dangerous territory. But it does seem, I mean, just looking at some examples, most of the big advances that were made at the end of the 19th century in astronomy, and in particular, understanding how the stars, well, not work, but, you know, understanding what was going on in the stars, what they were made of, right? The fact that all stars are basically the same stars, in the sense that all cats are basically the same cat, right? I mean, if you have a small cat, it's like that, you know, all right, that would fit in your house, right? If you have a cat that's, you know, 1.5 meters tall, you know, that's a cat you probably ought to stay away from because it might eat you, right? But they all look the same, right? They're all cats. Well, what these women showed was that stars are somewhat like that too. They're all similar to one another. And if you know one thing about them, you may know essentially everything about them. That was a big discovery. But another discovery made by women, and this is the one I think of a lot, was how to measure distances to galaxies, right? That was a big problem in astronomy. Distances are always a problem in astronomy. But
who was it who discovered it?
Henrietta Leavitt was her name, Henrietta Leavitt. And she was doing some work in South Africa, actually, that turned out to be the key to figuring out how far away a galaxy was. And once she did that, then this guy, Edwin Hubble, who for a while in his life wanted to become a boxer, you know, he used her work. I mean, he didn't ignore her name or anything. He freely admitted she should have gotten a Nobel Prize, but he used her work to measure the distances to galaxies. And the whole idea of an expanding universe, right? Or the fact that we're not in the center of the universe. All these ideas were so fundamental, you learn about them in 4th grade now, but those were all due to the work of this woman in South Africa, Henrietta.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit more about
I'm not sure I can.
Yeah, but we had some names, Henrietta Leavitt, but we also had Caroline Herschel. What can you tell us about?
Caroline Herschel. Yeah, she was related to William Herschel, actually. I think she was his sister, right?
Yes, it was his brother, and yeah, she worked for him and made the household, and the father was not able to to pay education for all his children, and of course for his daughter in this time. This is a unjust thing between women and men, and this is what I taught at the beginning, that women had no access to education because it was always seen, or in this time it was the man was the person who is alimenting the family, so why a woman should be educated, if she is not working. But her brother was also working in astronomy, Friedrich Wilhelm, and he had discovered Uranus, and Caroline followed him and worked for him. You know, can you say what she did?
Well, you'll have to tell me. Look, her brother, Bill Herschel, William Herschel,
yes,
is often said to be the best astronomer there ever was. Now, Caroline was, of course, his sister, and he couldn't, as you say, she could not actually work on astronomy except insofar as, because she had family in the biz, right? She could get some telescope time thanks to their good offices. So that was, you know, if you had, your brother was working in astronomy, maybe you could get some telescope time, that kind of thing. But it shouldn't be like that way, and I don't know that it is anymore.
Yeah. Okay, and what does she discover?
Well, what did she discover? She discovered a comet. I mean, you know, she was looking mostly at solar system objects, as almost everybody was at that time. Keep in mind that this, the early part, particular of the 19th century, and earlier than that, the late 18th century. I mean, photography had not been yet applied to astronomy. A lot changed once they could figure out how to use photographic equipment, cameras, behind telescopes, because now, it was more objective. You could measure things, right? You could take spectra, which is to say, pass the light of a star through essentially a prism and break it up into a rainbow and break it up into the spectral regions that you could see with that telescope. And that was the secret, actually. I think it was Wilhelmina Fleming, who was it? Who let me look this up, because if I get it wrong, I'm going to hear from her family. Maybe it was Annie Cannon. Yeah, I think it was Annie Cannon. Look, let me, rather than get lost in the details and probably say things that are wrong and simply off-putting, just point out the fact that these women got opportunities. Yes, in the case of Carolyn Herschel, she got opportunities because of her brother. But on all these other famous names in 19th century women astronomers, they almost exclusively came from the, thanks to the aid of the chairman of the Harvard College Observatory, right? Edward Fleming. And photography had finally, by the mid-1900s, the mid-1800s, and finally they had figured out how to make photos through telescopes. But more than that, if you just make photos of things, not necessarily very interesting. You point the telescope at a bunch of stars and you make a photo, so you get a photo and there's a bunch of white dots over it. That might or might not tell you very much. It's interesting. But what you could do is put a prism at the back end of the telescope and then break that starlight up into spectra. And they figured out very soon how to do that sort of wholesale. They would put the prism in front of the lens, the front lens of the telescope, right? The objective lens. When you did that, then you would see a photo of the stars. You might have 100 stars or something, but they each would be registered as short little spectra, short little rainbows.
Yes.
And so that's what they were doing at Harvard College Observatory. And so these photographic plates, they were on glass back then, they were all stacking up, and somebody had to look at all these things and figure out if there was anything to them.
Women, of course, women, And what would you say as a female outstanding astronomers?
You mean, are you talking people or their characteristics?
Women, the names. What do you think as a female outstanding astronomers? So,
well, it's sometimes said that Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin, and she's really a 20th century astronomer, but she married this Russian astronomer, Gaposchkin. But Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin said that her thesis, her PhD thesis, was the best PhD thesis in astronomy ever written.
Wow.
Yes. So, I mean, she was very accomplished. She was the one that sort of figured out that the stars are mostly hydrogen and helium, right? I mean, we know that. We've known that so long now that you don't even think about how radical that was, right? All right, you see this big light in the sky. Somebody says, well, what's it made of? I mean, it's made out of iron, or is it made of, hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, whatever. But she figured it out. It was mostly hydrogen and helium. And, that was a big deal. In fact, physicists 100 years earlier said, we'll never figure out what the stars are made of or how they work or anything. All that was wrong. It was largely due to this Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin.
And what about Maria Mitchell?
Yeah, Maria Mitchell, she had an observatory in Massachusetts, but to be honest, I'm not sure I know what she did. She probably looked through that telescope.
Maria Mitchell, she was in...
Well, while you're looking up what she did, I might say that these women are a very interesting story in and of themselves. Their lives, right? How they came into astronomy.
Maria Mitchell was also famous as a women's rights activist, and for its also mentioned work, but she also did some astronomical work in the American Academy of Art and Science.
Yeah. Just as I mean, this is generalizing, but it's maybe worth saying. Most of these women came from, if not wealthy families, at least well-off families. They had schooling. Quite a few of them actually went to college, which was not common for women either. There were some women's colleges, universities in the Northeast, right? In Massachusetts in particular, Wellesley, Smith, or others, a whole bunch of what were called the sister colleges there in Massachusetts. So they would attend those colleges, but then they couldn't get jobs in astronomy. Yeah, they had a degree, but these women had family money very often, and that allowed them a certain entry because if you have money, you have more opportunities. But these were all very, very accomplished women. It wasn't that they were just lucky, right? They were also very, very talented, and some of them were extraordinarily good mathematicians, and that helped too.
Yeah, I think to get a good position as a woman, you have to work 3 or 4 times harder than a man. Well, and I also would like to mention a German astronomer. We can come back later on to the American Society or World Society, but Walter Seiter was a German astronomer and became the first woman in Germany to hold an astronomy chair at the university. And this was really new for this time. And she also studied in Massachusetts and in Smith College in Northampton, and in 1967 she was a guest professor of the American Astronomical Society at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and and she worked in Bonn later on, and she was working on a method to derive redshift from the UK Smith telescope. Yeah, you can say a little bit more about this.
Well, no, not really. I mean, we could talk about what it all means, but it was a project actually.
Yes.
In Munster, and it was to sort of categorize these photographic plates that had been made as objective prism photos. In other words, they put a prism in front of the lens at the beginning, what we described before, and that allowed them to get spectra, which is the important thing in these things, of hundreds of stars with just one photo, right, kind of thing. But you also needed somebody to reduce the data. That was the problem that they had at the Harvard College Observatory. Again, mostly, I mean, looking at it from the big picture point of view, it was because of the application of photography, which itself was a new technology in a way, applying photography to astronomy. And so Harvard College Observatory, as other observatories, they were just producing these stacks of photographic plates of spectra of stars or photos of galaxies or whatever, that kind of stuff. And somebody had to address these things. And, you open up a door, here's this room filled with photographic plates. Okay, Bob, go organize these. Well, that's what they tried. They tried male grad students for a while. But men are very bad at this, apparently. And in fact, that was true in other areas, maybe worth mentioning. The telephone was invented, I think it was the 1870s, mid 1870s. And very quickly, in order to connect a whole bunch of subscribers together, you would have a switchboard. Everybody's seen switchboards. And then there would be an operator sitting behind that switchboard, and somebody would say, can you connect me with 3748 or whatever? And he or she would take a plug and plug it to connect these two people. I mean,
but they were more friendly also than the men.
Well, they were. They tried men at first because they didn't give these jobs to women, but the men were terribly unsuited for this. They began yelling at the subscribers. They would make mistakes. They would insult the customers. So somebody tried using women. They weren't serious about it at first, but they found that the women were much, much better. So all the operators became women. They were not men anymore. But I don't know that this is a tendency or a talent, I should say, that women have more of than men. I suspect they do, but you get into an argument right away if you say something like that. But the women were much better. They were more systematic. They didn't get bored. They didn't get mad. They would,
more patient.
They were more patient. They were more diligent about doing all this stuff. So that's what Pickering found at Harvard College Observatory, that the women, yeah. So he had a whole bunch of women working there, and some of them were doing the kinds of things we've been talking about. Others were doing other, kind of dog work things. They were not necessarily very interesting jobs, but it was an entree for them to get into the world of astronomy. And they made these huge discoveries, our concepts of the universe, how stars work, how they differ from one another, the fact that the universe is expanding, right? And that there was a big bang. All of that was because of the work of these women. The guys couldn't do it. They weren't patient.
And they get less money. They are paid lower, a lower salary. Do you think it is still a problem today that women have equal possibilities? And what do you think could we do to make it better?
Yeah, I think, now, this is just based on personal observation. I haven't done surveys. My feeling is that today things are much better. I worked in Europe for a while in astronomy. And in the department I was at, it was a university in the Netherlands. There were more women grad students in astronomy than men, right? So you could say, okay, that's a better deal, right? And it was also true in the other countries of which I was aware, in Italy and France and so forth. There were a lot of women who were studying, getting their PhDs in astronomy and getting jobs in astronomy. So from that point of view, you could say maybe it was better. I'm sure that they suffered, the subtle effects, if not very manifest effects, of discrimination and getting jobs and so forth and so on. There are also examples of that I could give, although it's a little embarrassing too, but where the women, a famous case is that of the pulsars, discovery of the pulsars, not so long ago, 1967 actually, and the pulsars were actually found by a grad student, but she was a woman, and as a consequence, she did not get the Nobel Prize for that discovery. It went to her advisor, who was a guy. So, this kind of bias has continued. I don't know, you could say it continues to the present day, it may or may not, but it certainly didn't go away as soon as, during the post-war era when we said, well, now we're enlightened and anybody can do any job they're qualified to do. But it wasn't true when I went to school, and I don't know whether it's true now.
Yeah, but the other problem is even if more women are studying astronomy, but that they get a better career, it's more difficult because if you look at the PhD students and less women, and if you look at the professors, there are hardly any women left, because also to get a better career is more difficult.
Well, that may be. I think in terms of the grad students, it's not clear to me that there are fewer women than men at the level of, but when you're talking about the faculty, professors,
yes,
that's surely true what you say. There are more men than women. And that may just be, if you will, a supply chain problem, because, the women have to come up through the ranks. They have to go through grad school before they can, even apply to become a professor somewhere. So that may be a problem that goes away or not, depending on what the biases are at that level.
Yeah, but what do you think could we do to make it better?
Well, you've got to be pragmatic. You say not things that would work in an ideal world, because the world's not ideal, but things that would help people at an individual level. You have a daughter and she wants to study astronomy. What could you do? Well, there are lots of things you can do, right? And beginning at a young age. Apparently, if you look at fourth graders, so fourth graders, it's like 10, 11 years old, somewhere around there. The number of girls interested in the sciences is essentially the same fraction as the number of boys. But a year or two later, that changes, and the girls tend to drop out. And I'm not sure it's entirely clear why that is, but part of it may be that they simply don't get the encouragement that the boys do, right? There's studies that do show that in the elementary level of schools, the boys tend to be treated differently than the girls, that they're encouraged more.
Mhm.
So I think if you're going to solve this problem, trying to solve it at the level of, college or grad school, it's too late. You need to solve this problem further down.
Yeah. At the beginning, yeah. Seth, I thank you very much for this conversation, but I will not stop it here because we take the questions from the audience, and also Adriano and Bernard are invited to ask some questions and to enter in the discussion. Barbara King is writing that she sent a photo of a famous sculpture to show a young girl looking into space by a telescope, and although the woman had smaller hands in general, and I know that was also a fact used by some scientists that women had smaller fingers, more patient, what you taught us, that they took measurements, and so because they were more able for fine work,
manual dexterity.
Yeah, genau. And here's an other question from, maybe you will read it loud, and then we can answer here from Duncan Corps.
Duncan Core, I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Is possible that age-old prejudices, sexism born of ignorance and indulged for millennia, inadvertently guided women into areas where they had opportunities and perspectives overlooked by men? Well, I mean, that doesn't sound unreasonable, but I mean, what you're asking is how did we develop these biases, right? That, okay, that's a job for men and that's a job for women, right? Mm-hmm. And, is there anything underpinning it other than the history of society? And I honestly don't think that there really is. I mean, there's some jobs, like working in a warehouse where you have to stock or stack heavy boxes on top of one another. Maybe you want men because they're stronger. But in general, work today, and this is not always true, but it is true today. Most work is, if you will, brain work, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, those sorts of things don't really matter. What counts is, did they have the opportunity, the interest, and the training? And that's what we're talking about. I mean, it seems obvious to me, but I don't know.
What do you think? I have another question. What do you think? How is the percentage between astronauts? Do you think there are still more men, but do you think there will become a higher percentage of women? Because it's still very seldom that a woman is going into space.
Well, I've known a lot of women who are interested in becoming an astronaut.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in Holland, again, where I lived for a while, I mean, I knew one of the women that had applied to be an astronaut. And I don't know how far along the chain she got, but she was a serious contender. I also knew Sally Ride, and I had conversations with her about these things. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, it's like women as airline pilots, right? I mean, how many times in the past 20 flights you've taken, does the captain come on the public address system and, hi, I'm, whatever, and it's a woman flying the plane. I mean, there's no reason that they can't fly the plane.
From Priscilla Thomas came a question: how will new analog astronaut programs affect women getting into space-related jobs, either by training or encouragement to girls coming up? It's in the question I asked, more or less.
Well, then you should answer.
Yeah.
Now that you know the answer, I'll let you take that one. Analog. I think most of the pilots are analog, aren't they?
Yeah, not dialogue.
I think most of them are the ones I've seen.
Okay, here, lady astronomers in ancient times. Hypatia was an Egyptian philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, then part of Eastern Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And so Priscilla Thomas wanted to be an astronaut, but in high school guidance counselor said, women don't become astronauts. Wow.
Well, that's
so sad. Yeah.
Not a resounding encouragement, perhaps, to say that. I mean, look.
If I can. No, please conclude. Then I would like to say something about women astronauts. I don't know. Did you conclude your?
No, but my
I'm sorry for interruption. Then, please.
Conclusion.
Yeah, then you can talk, Adriano.
Okay. No, I just wanted to observe that so far the training for astronauts was very hard. So it was, let me say, a job for men, because astronauts had 2 years very hard training, and with the centrifugal, with the pools, immersions, with the hard training. Therefore, this is also one of the reasons that we had smaller number. Okay, maybe you don't agree, but this is my is my observation.
Adriano, Valentina Tereshova was a woman in space.
Okay. No, I don't want to discuss about that, but I think
Discussion.
we have some women that are very strong, and we have other women that are less strong, and therefore, if you think about the number, you can also maybe think that as soon as the conditions to travel in space will be lighter, then we will have civilians that can travel in space, because acceleration will not be that hard, and all the conditions of space travel will be more comfortable. Then maybe we will see more women and more weak people, because not only women are weak, there are also weak men that maybe couldn't travel to space so far. So
I have to contradict you. Sorry.
oh, please contradict me. I'm not I'm not angry about that. But however, I think that this could be one of the points, because
okay, we are maybe not.
Women were in our history. We men were a little bit arrogant and always kept for ourselves some jobs that were made for men, for strong people. So this can be another argument that we can agree or not agree, but I think that in some proportion it could have worked in the past, and then will be better in the future if okay, because the threats are so big that we can only hope that we will keep going on the road to the outer space. That is okay.
I mean, this is an historic trend, right? 500 years ago, essentially any job you had involved physical labor. And if you were stronger, maybe you were better for it. But that's not true anymore. I'm thinking of medicine, for example. When I was a kid, all doctors were men. They were all men. And now, at least a fair fraction of them are women. And you say, well, but are they as good as the men? Yeah, they're better, in my opinion. So I think that, this is just a progression of the nature of work away from physical stuff. You build machines for the physical stuff, right? And you make the job accessible to people who can think quickly, right? Who have skills, motor skills, whatever the requirements. But it doesn't need to be one sex or the other. It doesn't seem to me that there's any inherent reason why you have to exclude women, even if they are, if you will, not able to lift up as many, as big a barbell as the guy next door. I mean, they can still pilot a rocket, I think.
Yes, I agree with Seth.
First woman ever to agree with me.
We were fighting all the time. No, but what I wanted to say is, I agree with you that physical things, also women have other structure of muscles, and they are not, in general, not able to carry heavy things. Yeah, in this regard, I agree with you. But if it is about going into space, you have not to carry 100 kilo. Okay, you have to stand zero gravity. Yeah, but it's different. You can do also this training, and as Seth taught before, they are more patient and have other abilities. So I think this will not be a reason for women or for men not to let go women into space.
Yep.
Or women, yeah.
And the robots are.
No, it is not when you are in orbit, when you are in zero gravity, that is not too hard. But the travel to orbit and from orbit to Earth. I have still very well presented the narration by the Italian Paolo Nespoli, the astronaut, that is now 60, maybe 63 or 64. And he came back from ISS on a Soyuz, and he told a history of a very hard travel back, because you are rumbling in a iron box that is soliciting you from all the sides, and it is definitely a very hard thing to bear. So.
It's not so easy to bear to get birth to a child, so it's also a hard job. I only wanted to mention this, and scientists found out that most of the men would not stand this pain. So don't take us like the weak things. You have another question?
No. I was going to say, this doesn't have to be a confrontational discussion.
No. I wanted to say this only.
It's inherently more interesting, confrontational, but that's really, because I don't think it gets to the nub of the argument in any case, because, going into space is something that's going to become very, very routine long before the end of this century, right? And if we ever build the space elevator, right, babies can go into space. Everybody can go into space. You can send your pet cat into space, right? Because it's very trivial at that point. The question is, if somebody can do the job, right? Yeah. Is there some other aspect of society that's keeping them from doing that, right? It's just a matter of really being fair, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to say.
Yeah. Or are there any other controversial questions here? Because mostly comments.
Mostly comments, yeah. But
and the money to go to school, Barbara writes. Yeah, that's true. That's a serious problem right there. I mean, historically, that's been important. I mean, we've seen it also we didn't talk about it, but the lives of these early women astronomers, that the family only had so much money. Some of them had lots of money, but not all of them. And if you only have so much money, traditionally, 150 years ago, the money would go to educating the men, and not the women. So that's an opportunity question.
Yeah. And in many countries, it's still the case in the world. And I think we should remind us that still and all over the world, we have regions where women's rights doesn't count. And tomorrow is International Women's Day, and we should think of all these women without rights, and hope they will in future have a better life, more rights. And I thank you for being our guest, because there are no more questions. Or do you want to say something else, Adriano?
No, what we could say is that the really critical condition of space affect both men and women, affect human life, and are the radiation from the sun and from cosmos, and are the low gravity that make damages to our bones and a lot of other things. So these are the real challenges that we have to face. And it is not an issue of gender. It is an issue of protecting human life in space. So, so this is, okay, something that is what we have to do as soon as possible.
Ina Larsen, hey Ina, from him comes something. We should not forget that women have problem that men don't have. Hormonal imbalance in special times. When this happens, they are definitely less competent to cope with dangerous situation. Oh, Ena, this is very thin ice. And Priscilla, this is a wonderful back and forth. Thank you both. In fairness, at the time I was in high school, NASA didn't have female astronauts. A better response would be not yet, but let's see how you can prep. So I think it is a nice conclusion. Thank you, Priscilla. So
she makes a good point. I mean, these societies that still restrict the, the education that women can get and so on. I mean, imagine somebody walks into the president or whoever is running a country and says, look, we're going to just change things. Beginning tomorrow, half of the population can't do things. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't say, how can that country be successful ever?
Yeah, So, and yeah, the discussion is going on. Pia is saying, Ena, you know nothing about women, so advice to better for the future. Yeah, in this sentence, I would like to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you very much
for being with us. Thank you, Seth, for joining us in this webinar, for giving us all this information.
Not much information, but a lot of opinion. I mean,
yes, a lot of opinion. And I hope you enjoy tomorrow, International Women's Day. And I have to say, in Berlin, it's a holiday. Yes.
Because of International Day of Women?
Yes, because of Women's Day. And I like this very much because it is recognizing what women are doing in all the world and what they are bearing. So I wish you a nice Women's Day, and to all men, it's not an invention of the industry of flowers. It's yeah, this is what's coming. So
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, so if you can, then bring your women flowers, not only tomorrow, also on other days, and spoil them. They are worth all of it. Okay, thank you. I wish you a nice day, a nice evening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.